Censorship by payment processors, MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, you name it, has been a hot button topic for a lot of people. If you're a fan of anime and manga, yes, you've been talking about this for a long time. Y'all are like, yeah, I've seen this coming from a mile away. This has been happening in Japan for a long time now. Now everybody's upset. Yes, I think the whole situation with Steam definitely brought it to the forefront to the general public. Yes, initially a lot of the stuff that was removed from Steam because of payment processors was, graphic stuff. It was like very inappropriate stuff. But I think these activist groups utilizing MasterCard and whatnot in order to put that pressure upon Steam chose the wrong target. You chose gamers. And not only that, but you made it pretty clear that you're fine with taking down a lot of stuff, including things like GTA and whatnot, because it's just too inappropriate. Stirring up that nest. But getting back to specifically Japan, because that's the stuff that I normally cover on this channel, anything anime, manga related, that's the stuff I really want to get into. I did appreciate seeing a lot of political leaders that are now finally coming forward and going, whoa, okay, now I kind of understand what's going on. Individuals like Taro Yamada, which I've covered for a long time, and yes, here recently, Zenko Kurishita. Kurishita has been doing a lot on this forefront. I like that he's coming forward. He's gotten a lot of attention on social media. A lot of people in the West are now kind of bringing to his attention a lot of what the censorship is doing and how they're working. That's the key thing there. A lot of people are presenting to him a lot of evidence that says this is how these payment processors are doing it. This is how these activist groups are doing it. You need to do something to stop this on your front. Well, hopefully we can do a lot on our front. At the same time, I do kind of acknowledge, while I do cover a lot of what Zenko does, a lot of what Taro Yamada does, I do still acknowledge that these individuals are still politicians. They're politicians in the end. I've always had the stance that how do you know a politician is lying? Their mouth is moving. I only trust a politician in what they actually do. So even with individuals like Zenko, I'm going to question just what are you doing with the information you're getting from the West, who he is, and what he's presenting to the Japanese people. And thankfully, here recently, we got that. From dinflamingogamer.jp, they actually did an interview with him and actually questioned him on a lot of the information that he's kind of gathered from individuals from the West. And I really want to kind of dig into this particular interview and see where he kind of stands on all this stuff. And yes, a lot of the stuff that I've gathered from this interview so far, it actually looks very, very interesting. Sort of, again, the invisible scheme of censorship by groups that aren't technically government officials. This non-government entity that is payment processors that is telling us what we can and cannot do, despite the fact that it's actually legal in the country it's being sold. So let's actually dive into a lot of what he discussed here. This is, of course, machine translated, so some of this stuff can be slightly off, and just keep that in mind. I'll leave a link down in the comments if you want to check it out for yourself. First off, they question Kurishita, what is actually going on with payment processors? He says, I've been following the issue of payments being cut off because of credit card companies' involvements for quite some time, since around 2022. Up until now, the cases I most often seen was adult-oriented manga and anime, such as those on DL's site. But in 2025, when restrictions began hitting Steam, even I was surprised. I believe this is probably the first time such a large-scale measure has been extended into the realm of games. The real point of contention is the global credit card companies like Visa and MasterCard, or platform giants known as GAFA, hold immense power beyond even the control of nation-states, yet abuse of that power without going through the democratic process. That's the key thing there. He's got the point right on the head right there. The idea these individuals are literally controlling more than even the governments are. The governments have to go through a process. They have to have, everybody come together and agree on a bill or agree on a decision. With payment processors, all they have to do is press a button. All they have to do is send an email, and they control what some company can buy or sell. That's scary. I'm sorry. In the end of the day, that's the scariest thing about all this. Put aside what is possibly being censored. Put aside if you find this game offensive. If it's legal, who cares? Because in the end of the day, allowing that to happen is the dangerous thing. Before the internet age, the content regulations that drew the most concern usually came from governments or local authorities. In those cases, if doubts or concerns arose, they could be raised directly to the Diet or local assemblies. Public opinion could point out this isn't right. Again, right now, we as citizens see this problem and we can't even go to an official to say, hey, what are you doing with my local area? That's not right that you put that ordinance in. It's affecting my business. They can't even do that. You call it the payment process and they go, oh, it's not us. It's somebody else. It's not us. We don't have anything like that. Oh, bye. Click. You can't even vote them out if they don't listen to you. That's scary. But when it's private corporations, it doesn't work that way. With the growth of internet, payments have become almost like infrastructure. Yes, again, another W by Zenko right here. I absolutely agree. Again, payment processing digitally has become literally something that you cannot live without anymore. If you can't process your payments, if you can't receive payments from somebody digitally, because we don't carry paper anymore, it's a necessity. It is now a necessity. And now the expressive freedom of content is swayed by the unilateral decisions of private companies that provide those payment services. In other words, something very close to censorship is now being carried out not by governments, but by corporations. Bingo. This problem has drawn even more attention this year, since globally popular platforms like Steam itch.io were affected. And I've seen many voices overseas as well saying this is not right. Yep. He then goes into talking about where he sort of sees it in a lot in the West, which again is like, the hub, having the censorship there first. He also acknowledges, technically there was a lot of situations where there was exploitation on the platform. So he does kind of take that stuff into account. And I do like that he does take some time to kind of reiterate with this group. Again, this is on a actual website that he's sort of kind of, doing the interview with. And so I do like that he's kind of taking the moment here to kind of express that a lot of people kind of agree with. A lot of people that are fighting against the censorship the payment processor is doing on things like, itch.io and Steam. A lot of people are going to have the agreement here that if it's actually illegal, yes, that should not be allowed. Yes, actual abuse, actual crimes should not exist. 100%. But yes, fiction is a different matter. When it comes to visual depictions, like deciding the age of a character, judgments inevitably become subjective. In other words, the line cannot be clearly drawn, and it's not all that clear whether regulating fictional characters, so-called non-existent minors, actually benefits society. Yeah, this is that area where, again, I agree in the idea that, yes, I don't partake in it, I don't necessarily 100% like the idea that it exists, but the idea here is, once you start creeping open that door, that's the problem. It's not hurting anybody. It's fictional characters. They don't even exist. The problem that I always personally see, the problem is that once you start opening that door, we start looking at everything. How old is that? Is that old enough? And again, it starts going the realms where you can't even have petite adults anymore because that could be offensive. We can't have that. And then you get into the realm of the idea that you can no longer have jokes that are made about young characters anymore. Everything has to be completely sanitized because everybody's afraid of possibly clipping into that regulation that these payment processors are doing. Here's the real problem. No one knows the true intentions of credit card companies. They've never explicitly stated a position or ideology. Yeah. It's like that line they put on Steam. It just has to follow their rules. What's the rules? You look on the website. There's nothing there. Steam says it's based on what the payment processors want. You go to the payment processors and you look at their regulations and they literally don't say anything. It just says they follow the law, and then there's this little bit that says things that might hurt the brand. What is written, however, in both Visa and MasterCard's rules, phrases like protect the brand, he brings up protect the brand, or no content that harms the brand. This is underlying logic behind the restrictions. In short, they say, we're doing this to protect the brand value. They don't even go so far as to declare, we consider fictional works to be child, so we ban them. Yeah. And again, it's not even just that. Let's not get it all mixed up here. I know he's being specific because they just talked about literally, again, actual abuse, things like, the hub and all that kind of stuff. But let's not get it mixed up here. We're talking about literally anything that offends them. Again, this isn't just that. This is things that are just violent. Things that touch on very touchy subjects. Like I've talked about before, something like Takapi's Original Sin would probably eventually get banned. Because, again, it involves young kids and it's very graphic. But it's a real story. It's a real story that should be told. It's not a real story because it has an alien in it. Shut up. I know it's not a real story. It's still fictitious. But what they're touching on is real stuff. It's real stuff. Bullying. It's real stuff. Taking your own life. It's real stuff. That said, Visa and MasterCard are not like ordinary private companies. They hold an enormous global market share. Exactly. That's the only reason they're getting away with this. For content platforms, it's obvious. If they lose the ability to use payment networks, both their sales and their user base will decline. Yep. That's what a lot of these companies end up doing. They either bend or they cut everything out. And that happened a lot in Japan prior to the whole Steam situation. You had companies that were literally clearing their entire shelves, clearing all their listings because they want to still do payment processing. They literally can't survive without it. So from the platform's perspective, The option of just use another card company is not practically available. I think there's a shared recognition, even overseas, that what's happening is essentially unreasonable demands backed by overwhelming market dominance. Again, like I've said before, if I remember correctly, it was Visa specifically, maybe MasterCard, I think it's Visa, like literally 50% of their market. They have literally 50% of their damn market. like that's crazy. He goes on, I've heard directly from people involved with multiple platforms, and in most cases, they're simply told, starting next week, you won't be able to use this anymore. And even then, the notice doesn't come straight from Visa or MasterCard, but indirectly through intermediaries such acquirers and payment processors. Again, it's this whole like, it's them. That's what I was talking about was so great about that discussion that Taro Yamada and them had with all these individuals, markets and whatnot, political leaders, payment processors, card holders, all that kind of stuff. And they were literally trying to suss out from them where exactly it's coming from. So they have no doubt in their mind who is the source. Because it ends up being one of those things where they're all pointing in different directions. It's not us, it's not us, it's not us, it's not us. What's common to all these accounts is that they don't give detailed reasons. They just say it isn't allowed without explaining why or what specifically is the problem. Because of that, platforms are forced to respond with an extremely short time frame, just a week or two, without even knowing which content triggered the restriction. As a result, they end up adopting a when in doubt, delete it. Again, clear the whole thing out, which inevitably leads to mass removals of content. Yep. And again, it comes back to the idea that when they do ask them, what the hell's going on? What's the problem? They go, we don't know. They said it hurts the brand. Well, what on my site is hurting the brand? Like, what is too far? What is too much? It's that, yeah, he says right here, exactly. Because no specific reason is given, it creates a powerful chilling effect. You don't know what breaks the rules, so you avoid everything. Here's some interesting stuff right here. They asked Kurishita, as you mentioned earlier, when the problem first emerged, it seemed to have particularly strong impact on Japanese companies and content. Why do you think the effects on Japan stand out so much? First of all, as I noted with the overseas adult site incident, this issue is by no means unique to Japan. But the reason Japan's cases stand out so much is that the country has such a thriving culture of illustrations and manga, two-dimensional forms of expression. I agree. I think there is something sort of like inherently unique about Japanese media and whatnot. A lot of it is 2D. It's got a lot of expressionness. There's a lot of uniqueness to it. And there's sort of this kind of blurred line between youth and, adult. I think that's a big thing a lot is that they like to draw a lot of their stuff very youthfully. And I would argue, I think that Asians in general have a very youthful look to them. They look younger much longer. And they do pride themselves in that youth. I think there is sort of a lot of love for the beauty of youth. And that is not a bad thing. Yeah, it's wrong to think that somebody's ugly just because they're older, but there is a beauty in youth. And they love to express that beauty in youth. It's an appealing thing, and they love to kind of build into it. They do acknowledge that to sell something, it's got to be youthful looking. Especially with illustrations, perception varies greatly from person to person, making the boundary extremely vague. He's saying it right there, exactly. And particularly with Japanese-style illustrations, Western viewers are prone to judge that doesn't look like an adult. Those subjective judgments, I think, are one factor driving expression regulations. Exactly. And again, I'm not going to be oblivious to the existence of, yes, younger-looking characters being drawn in very inappropriate situations. I'm not going to deny that it doesn't exist. And again, I acknowledge that is something I don't want to partake in, but at the same time, I don't think that's a line that should be drawn. If you don't like it, don't partake in it and stay away from it. At the same time, there's no damage being done. At the same time, opening that regulation, that restriction is going to open that floodgates. That's where I hate it. They didn't go into talking about collective shout. We've kind of gone over that on this video before, what they're doing, how they're, causing problems, going to the credit card companies and whatnot. And it all builds up into a very interesting kind of take that Kurishita has here. No one takes responsibility. The invisible scheme. I think that's a really good way to put it. The invisible scheme, basically. When it comes especially to Steam's case this time, it's the fact that no one takes responsibility. In other words, the responsibility for regulation is dispersed in such a way that it's very hard to see. In reality, Visa and MasterCard will say, we didn't do it directly. And again, this is exactly what they were pulling with Taro Yamada. When Taro Yamada went directly to Visa headquarters, they said, why are you coming into our companies in Japan and telling them what they can and cannot sell and buy? Oh, we didn't do anything. We didn't do anything. It's that whole like passing the buck to somebody else. Nobody did anything. The whole process of, processing a payment is a very complicated process where it goes through so many different individuals and companies that it's hard to tell exactly who's cutting off the pipeline. They're the ones making the rules, the regulations, but the ones actually enforcing those rules are the acquirers and payment processors under them. As things stand, the question of, so who really is at fault becomes extremely unclear. I think this invisibility is something that runs through the entire problem of credit card regulations. Again, that's the big problem. And that's what they were trying to get to with that meeting with Taro Yamada and the former prime minister. All those individuals are trying to come together to figure out, well, how do we stop this? We all know who's causing it. We all know the problem. The problem is, how do you regulate it? That's the problem, because these government officials now, I think they want to cause regulation. I know that's a bad word for a lot of people, but in the end of the day, because it's such a massive market, because it has such a massive hold on the market, and yes, because it's a necessity. It's a necessity that everybody has. The government kind of has to step in and say, you have to stay within these bounds, because if you're not, action's going to come upon you. But where do you put it? That's the problem. That's what they're trying to figure out. Asking what can be done, he says gamers and others who are highly invested in this issue recognize the responsibility of credit card companies and are speaking up, asking, is this really okay? And I like that. The idea that, again, this has been something that's been happening for a while now, but I think because of like government officials and a lot of the general public not really understanding what's actually happening, or at least seeing this threat kind of building up, it's nice to see this has finally come in the forefront now before it affects other things. Essentially, us anime fans, manga fans, and gamers are essentially sacrificial pawns for everybody else in the general public to realize that something isn't right. Before suddenly out of nowhere, the payment processors, MasterCard and Visa, start telling who can buy burgers. Before they tell a certain race that they're not allowed to go to certain clubs. That's literally, again, I'm going to extremes here, but this is literally what's happening. They're choosing law. They're choosing regulations by saying who can and cannot run that card, that thing. They can decide what's too many drinks for somebody to have. There's a good example. They can literally go, my friend was killed in a car accident the other day, and so I really don't like people that drink too much. So now I think people should only be able to buy 5 drinks before they have to get out of a club. And thus they tell the bars, don't sell somebody more than 5 drinks. Because I think more than 5 drinks is just too much. That is inappropriate. That can technically happen. I know it sounds crazy, but that could technically happen. Kurishita recognizes that gamers are going, whoa, stop this now. This needs to stop now. But precisely because it's made hard to see, I think many people don't fully grasp the danger of the situation. And exploiting the lack of awareness in order to maintain power is not healthy. Bingo. Still, even if we think that way, we can't avoid using their services, can we? That's the problem. As I said from the beginning, credit card payments have become essentially infrastructure in today's world. From that perspective, I think what's important may be the presence of competition. For example, if Visa or MasterCard had a sense that problems like this will cause us to lose market share, they might not impose such aggressive regulations. Ping pong, bingo, ding, 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 ding. Exactly. There's no competition currently, really. So they can do this stuff and people won't just switch. Like, I even looked at my own wallet. I never cared what logo was on it. That gets in the whole argument about this whole, like, it hurts the brand. I don't care what brand is on my card. Get real. The problem is you look at those things and, like, it's always the same too. It's always the same too. There's no real other ones. You have to go out of your way to find a bank that doesn't have them. And even then, you find some company that doesn't put that on the card itself, and it might still end up using their service at some point. That's the problem. They go on to talk about, yes, having a credit card company emerge in the market itself, tolerant towards creative expression. Yes, in that regard, I think it would be good to have a convenient and reliable payment method that also takes into account a perspective of protecting Japan's content industry. Yeah, indeed, that's why Japan-oriented payment methods like JCB are now in the spotlight. Now here's where we get in the nitty-gritty. You can talk about this all you want, but what is Japan doing? So the big important question comes up is how should Japan's legislation and administration respond? The interviewer asks, I think we've now heard a general outline of your own views. From the standpoint of Japan's government and legislation, how they seem to perceive this issue. Kurishita says, regarding the problem of credit card companies intervening in expression and content, as far as I know, the first time it was ever raised in a plenary session with the Prime Minister was at the end of 2024. That late. At the time, the Prime Minister responded with something like, I didn't know such things was happening. I'll have it investigated. In other words, it was not a situation where the government was already taking action. They just literally just found out. Oh, and again, a lot of this problem is they just don't understand it. It was also around that time that major news reporters first began covering the issue. I think only recently has public awareness finally started to spread. Again, I think part of that might have been Nico Nico, but probably not. The issue is about relationship between politics and private companies, so it's certainly a difficult one to handle. The important thing to ask, within that, what can actually be done? And one key answer is a diversification of payment methods. Again, giving some sort of benefit to other companies to kind of build up ways around certain taxes or whatnot. I could see that. Give benefits to other companies to rise up rather than sort of regulate Visa or MasterCard. There will surely be a debate on whether the government should go as far as to say, let's use alternatives. Still, the idea of payment nationalism, that is, aiming to be self-sufficient in payment methods, is something seen not only in Japan, but in many other countries worldwide. Yeah, I would say hopefully it's not government run or government owned or controlled, but I don't see why not. Again, sort of something I've said in the comment sections in previous videos is, well, I don't like the idea of regulations. There is still an element here where they're now acknowledging there is a foreign entity, a foreign company outside Japan that is affecting our economy. And this is the signs of it. This is very small, but this is the sign of something that could grow into something really big. I don't doubt them for wanting to shut that down and say, no, only use domestic companies, only use domestic banks. It's going to take some time to build that, though. Again, because they have that 50% market share. It's going to take some time to kind of shift things around if they do. Anyways, it carries on from there to talk about his kind of inspiration into going into independent and the fact that he's going to stand on this heel and die on it. Because, yeah, I've honestly seen it in his comment sections and whatnot. He's getting a lot of heat, especially from the West. A lot of very deranged individuals kind of attacking him and calling him favoring youngs, all that kind of crap. A lot of really dumb people because he wants to protect freedom of expression. Things that are legal, he wants to protect it. Whether in Japan or abroad, there are very few politicians who address such issues openly. I agree. It's something that nobody wants to stand on. It's like the whole SB20 situation. It's like nobody wants to question the bill because otherwise that means you like this. No, it doesn't. It's not saying you like this stuff. It's saying that you're afraid of what it might damage outside of that stuff. He's getting that. And he acknowledges that not many people are willing to do that. Protecting expression, for example, makes you an easy target for labeling and misunderstandings, but it's absolutely necessary to stand with those struggling with expression regulation in creative fields, and to protect Japan's content culture, including games, anime, and manga. I've already gone this far, so I'm prepared to see this theme through to the end. He's gonna die on that hill. Very, very interesting kind of perspective into Kurishita. I do appreciate sort of the willingness that he has to kind of put himself out there. And again, I do acknowledge kind of reading through a lot of this interview. I didn't get through all of it. So again, I'll leave a link down in the comments down below. I like to see that he's got a good head on his shoulders. This guy seems to acknowledge where the problem is, acknowledge that there is a threat here, and that something needs to be done. He's a good-looking guy too, by the way. Good-looking guy too. He acknowledged there's a problem. They're sussing out the root, and they're just trying to figure out where to sort of attack it from. Now, granted, he's kind of working with a lot of groups right now, again, like Taro Yamada, which I do appreciate, by the way, because I believe the two of them are on different sides of the field here. They're not technically on the same, they're not in the same party. And I do think that's a really awesome thing to have individuals from different groups to sort of come together and acknowledge a problem. But seeing sort of how he sees this whole situation, how they're kind of figuring out how to go about attacking it, and bringing awareness. Like I said before, this being on this site, them kind of bringing awareness to this, doing these interviews and whatnot, bringing it to the Japanese citizens to kind of acknowledge where the problem is something that they are doing really well there. And I hope that more people do it over here, because this is something that in the general public needs to acknowledge. Like I mentioned earlier with the whole like beer comment there I had, the idea that it starts from here and it's eventually going to go elsewhere. Nobody wants to defend it when it comes to video games. It's just video games. What happens when it becomes something that everybody else uses? What if they don't like the idea that you're watching too much TV? They find it too unhealthy to watch too much TV, and suddenly your grandma has her television suddenly cut off because she had it on for too long. The TV companies now have to start regulating, you know, how much viewing habits you have on television because it might be unhealthy. It's stuff like that. It sounds stupid, I know, but it's real. It's a real threat. Anyways, really cool to kind of read through that. They here recently had a talk with Taro Yamada and Morikawa that I really hope some of this is transcribed out that I can check out, because I would love to know exactly what they talked about. It was brought up there about the whole aspect of, you know, financial censorship and whatnot. So it does look like, at least with that whole situation, that was brought to a lot of people's attention. A lot of this was like a conversation about censorship in general. Hopefully I can get a transcription or something like that. I would love to kind of look into that as well. But really cool stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. Hopefully you learned something about Zenko. And yes, really kind of the perspective of the political parties in Japan, what they're seeing with here and how they feel they can kind of tackle the problem. But I hope you guys found it informative. If you did, hit the like button down below. If you like this content, you want to support the channel more, become a member of the channel. Until next time, y'all take care.